Hello everybody. We just got a cool new animated short about Charlie and the Shadows with the latest update. So that means today we're going to be talking about WX-78 instead. Out of all of the weird and wonderful characters in Don't Starve Together, none really stand out as much as WX-78. Except for maybe these guys. So today, I'm going to be going over what exactly this robot is. Why are they here? What's their story? And how does their immortal form even function? And most importantly, who exactly is this Woodrow person a lot of people like talking about? Let's find out. Where do we begin with this bot? Well, they were added to the game way back in the distant year of 2013. The same update spoilage was added. Back then, their kit was incredibly simple. Eat gears to power up, get struck by lightning to become stupid fast and glow, eat rotten food fine, get hurt by water. Simple, just like all the regular Don't Starve characters still are nowadays. It wasn't until WX got their rework update in Don't Starve Together did they get their cool circuit system letting you customize them to your liking. But this video isn't about them as a playable character, well no, this video is about who they are as a character in the lore. Chronologically, we need to go back a few years, long before the events of Don't Starve Together even take place, even before the events of Don't Starve Alone take place, and for that, we need to look at the disconnected animated short. Let's go over it briefly. The short itself starts in the current time of DST, showing the survivors beaten and bruised after a pigman attack, since when is that a feature, but focuses on Winona working on a now deactivated WX. She's seen trying to put them back together, but finds a strange part that was seemingly disconnected from the rest of their body. With little understanding of what it actually is, she plugs it back in, unlocking some long forgotten memories inside of WX. Enter the sunrise years of the early 20th century. The exact date is shrouded in mystery, but we know it roughly takes place around the 1920s. We know it's from around this time period since in Winona's animated short, we can find dates ranging from 1906 to 1911 on her corkboard, along with a photo of the very factory the short takes place in, as well as blueprints of WX-78 themselves. For all we know, however, this flashback could take place in the late 19th century. The date is not too important, however. The animated short takes place in the perspective of a scientist, or even a lab technician who's working alongside this bespectacled fellow we now know as Robert Wagstaff. I could go on all about this guy's history, but I already did so in a video linked up in the corner here. Check that out if you want to know more. But to keep things short, this guy was able to somehow discover the constant, the world where Don't Starve takes place, from the comfort of the real world, and worked tirelessly to find a way to travel to and from there, for whatever twisted purpose he desired. This animated short takes place during his research into the constant. But who is this other scientist, the one's perspective we're seeing these memories from? Well, they are what many people call Woodrow. Now, who exactly is Woodrow? Well, it's ambiguously canon lore at this point, but Woodrow is what people refer to WX as before they were known as WX. Their old human name, so to speak. This is never actually referenced in-game or even by Clay at all outside of the game, but the name came about because WX's voice files in the game's code are labelled as Woodrow. So the community did what they did best and just decided that it was their name. Since then, plenty of fictional work in the fandom refers to this person here as Woodrow. Keep in mind it's not technically canon, but for a lot of people, it is. For the sake of this video and my own headcanons, I will be referring to this person as Woodrow. Whilst Robert Wagstaff was known as an inventor, thanks to his name being tied to the Voxola brand of radios and other gadgets, in this laboratory we can find evidence of research that isn't typically tied to his name. Animals with robotic limbs, augmenting living organisms with inorganic parts. But the one we're seeing spearheading this research isn't Wagstaff himself, but the person whose perspective the animated short is seen through, Woodrow. For what we can gather, these two worked together on numerous projects in this laboratory, but the one that was most important to today's story is their work on robotics. namely humanoid robots. As this flashback is seen through the perspective of WX and their memories, you can safely ascertain that their work didn't just mean to construct a fully autonomous robot, but to transfer their mind into one, foregoing the limitations of a human body. Why else would they be doing this? Why else would a robot be having these memories? Wagstaff is seen somewhat uncomfortable with this prospect, however, but despite all of this, helps Woodrow achieve their goal. With whatever device they managed to construct, Woodrow was no longer, and WX-78 was born. The early form wasn't perfect, as we can see through WX's eyes. They keep having images of their human form still flashing between them. It's almost as if this project wasn't complete enough for them. WX is then seen destroying old research notes, which we'll go over more why they did so later. As the animated short progresses, we can see that WX and Wagstaff conflict, as things start to get more and more tense between them. WX lashing out at Wagstaff, and Wagstaff burning the excess chassis we saw earlier in the short. It's not known exactly what was the root of this conflict, but as we can see from Wagstaff being uncertain of WX's desire to become a robot, and how WX in-game is seen incredibly brash to organics as a whole, it's no surprise that it happened. This conflict eventually culminates in Wagstaff seemingly throwing WX through a gateway. The gateway the two worked on before in the animated short if you paid close enough attention. The same gateway we saw in numerous animated shorts in the past. A gateway to the constant. Cut back to the modern day, and with all these memories rushing back to WX, they decide that these memories need to stay in the past, as they crush the very device that held these old protocols. So that was a rundown of the animated short. Now that we know the actual history of WX, let's see about answering some questions, shall we? Let's start with why. Why was WX made? Why did Woodrow want so badly to turn themselves into a robot? For that, let me tell you a little something about transhumanism. It's basically a philosophical movement and an intense desire to replace as much of your human body with synthetic parts as possible, pushing past the limits of what you were given. The term itself wasn't coined until way after DST took place in 1957 by biologist Julian Huxley, but it's not too far-fetched to say the simple desire to push past what's humanly possible has existed since the dawn of man. And with how robots and even the concept of synthetic humans have existed for hundreds of years, it's safe to say WX harbouring this philosophy is incredibly likely. With how we see WX disassociating as a human and how much it despises the limits of organic creatures, it adds up. There is also another reason. You see, nowadays in-game, we know Wagstaff as the crazy old man that wants to control the moon who finally got what they deserved. A popular theory a lot of people had, including myself, was that before he was able to project himself into the constant, he wished to make some kind of robot that could enter the constant without the risk of causing any harm to anything living or sentient. It's possible this line of WX-based robot was designed to be that specific purpose. But as we saw, Wagstaff probably wasn't too big on the whole humanoid robot research like WX-78 was. In fact, I'll be willing to say he had very little to actually do with it. Sure, it may have been a joint venture at some point, but I personally believe that this build cool robots thing was mostly WX's idea, be it under the guise of exploring the constant or a very convenient coincidence. It's even possible that WX wasn't pushed into the gateway, but entered of their own volition like they did in the animated short. Backwards, for some reason. A big argument a lot of people have implying that WX was made by Wagstaff was the man's quotes for the clockwork enemies when playing as him in Don't Starve Shipwrecked. He mentioned how he always struggled waterproofing his automata, which, as you already know, WX is far from waterproof. But couple years later, Wagstaff would make the Wobot, a robotic vacuum cleaner that indeed is not waterproof. Sure, this doesn't prove my point at all, but it does show that Wagstaff is more into the idea of his robots being less humanoid and more decadent. And the one time he did make a successful robot that was waterproof, this happened. But surely if he could make a humanoid robot, he would, right? The biggest evidence we have for this point is in WX-78's compendium entry. In there, we can see that the research into their robotic form was headed by both Woodrow and Wagstaff, with Wagstaff pulling out of the project as time went on, leading to WX developing their new form in secret. Until, well, they had their falling out. Perhaps Wagstaff was okay with the project early on, even after WX transformed themselves into their current form, but to WX, it wasn't enough. The constant flashing between human form and robot form showed them that the research was far from perfect. There was still too much humanity left in this design. Maybe this is why WX continued to work in secret, and what would eventually lead the two to fall out. Wagstaff wasn't comfortable with WX removing all humanity from their design. Could this be what the so-called empathy module was originally designed for? That heart-like component that drove all these human memories back? Built there by Wagstaff as a means to keep the host's humanity, either as a failsafe to make sure they never forget who they are, or maybe something to keep them human no matter what happens. It's crazy to think that Wagstaff, the person who didn't care and had very little regard for the safety of the survivors, was possibly the one that wanted to keep WX in check and make sure they never lost their humanity. It's oddly poetic, in a way. Despite all that, there is something we really cannot forget though. Remember how earlier I said Wagstaff was crazy for the moon's power? Yeah, so is WX. In fact, the robot wishes to take the moon's power in place of Wagstaff, or even work alongside the moon. This implies that WX knows the power that the moon, that Alter, has. Could the two have shared their research before ending up where they both are now? Does WX know exactly what Wagstaff wants Alter for? Do they want that power themselves before Wagstaff can? Maybe that's why the two originally had disagreements back in the day. Maybe WX built their robotic form to get closer to Alter and steal the power for themselves. But after seeing what Wagstaff did with Alter's power and how it ended up for him, maybe it would have been better if WX had it instead. Oh, I don't know if I've mentioned it yet, but WX despises Wagstaff and everything that he stands for. But why could that be? Was it the whole unsupportive of their new robot lifestyle thing and probably pushing them into an inescapable infinite starvation dimension? Is that grudge still carrying over? Or does WX hate them simply because the power of the moon should have been theirs instead? And seeing Wagstaff succeed where they wish they could is enough to drive intense feelings of hatred towards them. Honestly, it's probably a mix of both of the reasons. Also, for some reason, WX is programmed to hate, which is awesome, I respect that. So, is that it? WX used to be an assistant of Wagstaff, known by the fans as Woodrow. They worked together on building a gateway to the Constant, whilst Woodrow themselves led research on a robotic form, and together they built a whole new robotic body for Woodrow. This most likely led to a lot of disagreement between the two, causing them to have a very messy breakup, which carries their, albeit one-sided, distrust for each other into the modern day of Don't Starve Together, where one is now missing thanks to him meddling with things he doesn't understand, whilst the other is stuck here seemingly forever with a bunch of other random survivors. In robot form, that is. If WX uploaded their mind to a robot, then where is their actual human body? In the early days of Don't Starve lore theories, people thought WX's body was still inside their robot form, since when you get struck by lightning, you can see your skeleton. However, that doesn't carry too much weight because that logic gives Willow bone hair. I have my own little crack theory that any important person in play in the chess game that is Don't Starve Together becomes a part of the world, given a spirit and a body even if they don't have a soul. Explains why WX has a ghost and drops a skeleton when they die, despite not having either. No, it's very clear that WX doesn't have the skeleton or remains of a human body inside them. You can see it in their animated short when Winona is digging around in their guts, which means that WX's human body is still in the real world. Somewhere. But where exactly? Under the floorboards of Wagstaff's old house, aka Wilson's current house. Yeah, Wilson moved into Wagstaff's old home and found a human skeleton in his floorboards. This is most likely our culprit to what happened to WX's body. Did Woodrow literally die after they became a robot? How does one's consciousness leave their body? Have any of you played Soma? It gives me those vibes and I really do not like it. Hang on, if that is WX's corpse, why did Wagstaff keep it? More strangely enough, why did he keep it at his own house? Could he have not, buried it, burned it, fed it to pigs, or even just tossed it through the portal into the constant with WX? The more I think about it, the less it makes sense. Let's move on. The existence of WX-78 is shrouded in mystery, but hopefully I was able to uncover a lot of what they are and how they came to be. How a group of only 2 people were somehow able to make a fully autonomous, conscious, self-sustaining robot in their own private laboratory in the ripe year of the 1920s is an even bigger mystery. Maybe WX was made from parts and gears found in the constant. Heck, I mean, it's possible, since WX and Wagstaff knew of the constant's existence most likely before WX was even made. Maybe they saw the clockworks that the ancients built and it inspired them that, yeah, something like that is more than plausible. Would explain how WX is able to eat gears found in the constant, wouldn't it? It's honestly the only way I can even see WX existing in any form, to be fair. Even nowadays, in the year of our Lord 2025, we barely have fully autonomous humanoid robots, or consciousness transfer even. And not only that, but also robots that can taste or even smell things. Which, by the way, is something I want to make a quick tangent on. WX many times will mention that they lack a nose and are thankful for it, but also in other certain quotes, they mention that they can still smell stuff. So either they're lying to seem like a cool robot, or can selectively choose what they wish to smell. Maybe they have a specialised smelling module that can filter out the good smells from the bad smells. Other than that, everything else is somewhat in the realm of possibility. A CPU for a brain, a masticating module for a mouth, that means to chew something, don't worry, it doesn't mean anything else, and even some form of biofuel refinery for a stomach that can digest down nutrients into power. It's something that has existed in the real world for a long time, but typically biofuel can be made out of nearly anything organic, such as grass and wood, which are things WX cannot eat. But also, biofuel refiners don't get tummy aches from digesting bad food. Maybe monster meat is spiky, or maybe it's just like WX says and it's incompatible. Maybe the chemical compounds of monster meat mess with their circuitry, somehow. With how many times WX contradicts themselves in their quotes, I can see why people used to think this was a person in a robot suit. Personally, I believe it doesn't matter what WX's robot form did in the real world. Now that it's in the constant, it has to abide by the rules of this dimension. And that includes your CPU going insane, your chemical processes hurting when you eat monster food, and even a skeleton appearing inside you whenever you get struck by lightning. But still, we saw in WX's short they were able to achieve consciousness transfer into a robotic body in the real world, so they still deserve all of the credit. This person was way ahead of their time. Or maybe, just maybe, it took more than known science to achieve a goal like that. Maybe it took a little bit of magic from a certain little dimension we're all very used to by now. So that's WX. Illogical, impossible, and irrational, but I wouldn't have them any other way. For what is probably just an excuse for Clay to make a silly cool robot character, they are by far one of the most interesting ones we have knocking about in the constant. Thank you, bots. I cannot wait for your insight tree. However, that marks the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching me waffle on about a silly robot in a video game. What character would you like me to talk about next? Woody? Wilson? Wanda? Witherstone? Drop a comment down below and I'll get to it when I can. For now though, do me a big favour and have a lovely day, alright? Thank you for watching. Bye bye.